Hey everybody, welcome back for episode 18 of the Simpleton Sermon Podcast. As always, I am your host, Pastor JJ, and we're trying to keep things simple but not stupid. Here in episode 18, we're going to be diving into Genesis 44. We're in part 3 of the series on Genesis that we have been working through. We're following Joseph in the last pieces of his story. And I got to tell you, I preached this sermon and it was absolutely amazing, some of the stuff that we found in the text. I had somebody come up to me after service when I preached this sermon, and they said, a lifelong Christian in their 80s, and they were like, I never looked at it in that way. That was just amazing. They really appreciated it, and I know I appreciated discovering this stuff and sharing it with my congregation, and I pray it blesses your soul as well. Now, as always, I always like to do a little plug and say that while I hope these sermons are a blessing in your life, I do not want you to look at them as a replacement for involvement in the local church. Please, if it's possible, connect to a local church. It is so valuable. But in the meantime, let's grab our Bibles. I'm in the New International Version, and we're in Genesis 44, and here we go. There's an old story. I may have told it before, but it blows my mind and it fits perfectly for today, so I'm going to tell it again. Robert Coleman put it in his book, Written in Blood. Once upon a time, there was a little boy whose sister was very sick, and she was so sick that she actually needed a blood transfusion. And the doctor explained that she had the same disease that the little boy had recovered from 2 years earlier. He had it, he beat it, and now she had it. And her only chance for recovery was a blood transfusion from someone who had previously conquered the disease. And because the two children had the same rare blood type, the boy was an ideal donor for the the marrow transplant. The little boy's name was Johnny, and the little girl's name was Mary. And so the doctor came to Johnny, and he kind of explained it to him and said, "You're the perfect match. Will you give your blood to Mary?" It's a scary procedure for a kid to go through, and it helps a lot if the kid is on board and is excited to help. And so he comes to him and he says, "Will you donate your blood to help your sister?" And the little boy Johnny hesitated. His lower lip started to tremble. He was really nervous, but then he paused and he smiled and he said, "Okay, for my sister, yes, I will help." So they bring the two children into the hospital room, and Mary is this little girl. She's pale and thin, and Johnny, the 8-year-old big brother, he's robust and healthy. And they didn't say anything, but when little Mary looked over at Johnny, he grinned back at her, gave her a big thumbs up, trying to make her feel better. And the nurse came in and she inserted the needle into his arm. And Johnny's smile faded. And as he watched the blood flow through the tube, and after a little while, they were actually almost done. And Johnny spoke up and he said, "Doctor, when will I die?" And it took them a moment to realize that Johnny thought that when you donate blood to someone, you donate all of it. He thought that he was literally going to be giving all of his blood to his sister. He thought he was going to die to save his sister. And even though it meant his death, he only hesitated for a few seconds. Thankfully, Johnny didn't have to die for his sister, but I wonder what we would say if that's what we thought we were being asked. Today is part 3 of our series in Genesis. We're finishing up this story of Joseph in chapter 44 of Genesis, and next week is the finale, the last sermon in the series with the big reveal at the end of the story. But before we get today is the moment that the trap has been sprung, and I mentioned a couple weeks ago, this whole series was a big setup, right? I called it a prank at the beginning. I said there's a prank is what he's doing with his brothers. But what we've discovered as we've gone is that there's a lot more going on here. This is not just a prank. It's a moment of discipline and transformational change. You see, 2 weeks ago, Joseph was laying a foundation, but today, all the pieces come together in a moment of redemption. But I don't want to get ahead of myself, so let's dive in. I guess we're going to see that again. First things first, let's do a quick recap of what's happened so far. This guy Joseph was his dad's favorite son. Dad gave him all these gifts, and Dad loved him more than his other kids. And when he was a kid, he had this dream where all his brothers bowed down to him. And so naturally, his brothers did what all big brothers do. They sold him into slavery in Egypt. At first, they were going to kill him, right? They were like, let's just kill him, let's get rid of him. And then they decided, nah, let's just throw him down a well, right? We'll leave him down in this dry well. But then one of the brothers, Judah, came up with this brilliant idea. He's like, wait a minute, those travelers, those guys over there, they are headed towards Egypt. Why don't we get a little money for our brother? And so they sell Joseph. Judah sells his brother into slavery, right? All the other brothers are there, but this is Judah's thing, right? It was his idea. Now, fast forward a little bit, and Joseph has been freed from slavery, and he is actually the number 2 most important person in all of Egypt. And Joseph has saved Egypt from a famine, right? They prepared for it. And so Joseph's brothers, they come to Egypt in search of food. And this time, we've got all 11 brothers, including baby brother Benjamin. And the important thing to know is that Benjamin is the new favorite. Like when Jacob, the dad, when he lost Joseph, it wasn't like he suddenly went, oh no, what have I done creating envy between my sons? I should treat all my children equally and I should love all my children. No, Jacob does not learn any lessons at all. Instead, he clings to Benjamin even more than he did Joseph. Benjamin was his favorite. Benjamin is the baby. Benjamin is the apple of his eye. Jacob has not learned any lessons. In fact, one of his sons ends up in jail. And they say, you have to let Benjamin go or your son will be in jail. And Jacob says, too bad. Because I like Benjamin and I don't care if Simeon's in jail. I like Benjamin. And so this is the backdrop for our struggle. We walk into chapter 42 with 2 key details. Judah sold Joseph into slavery, and Benjamin is the new Joseph, right? Benjamin is the favorite son, but the setting is almost exactly the same as when Joseph was a kid. So the brothers arrive in Egypt, right? And they come before Joseph, and they all start out in chapter 41, right in that first verse, 44. It says in verse 1, now Joseph gave these instructions to the steward of the house. Fill the man's sack with as much food as they can carry. Put each man's silver in the mouth of his sack. Then put my cup, the silver one, in the mouth of the youngest one's sack, along with the silver for his grain. And he did as Joseph said. And as the morning dawned, the men were sent on their way with their donkeys. And they had not gone far from the city when Joseph said to his steward, go after those men at once and ask them, why have you repaid good with evil? Isn't this cup the cup my master drinks with and uses for divination? This is a wicked thing you have done. So Joseph tells his steward, load him up with some food, take my cup, my special cup, hide it in the bag of the youngest son, and then send them on their way. And as soon as they leave, go get them and accuse them of stealing. Verse 6. And when he caught up with them, he repeated these words to them. But they said, why does my Lord say such things? Far be it from your servants to do anything like that. We even brought back to you from the land of Canaan the silver that we found inside the mouths of our sack. So why would we steal silver or gold from your master's house? If any of your servants have found it, he will die, and the rest of us will become my Lord's slaves. Very well then, he says, let it be as you say. Whoever is found to have it will become my slave, and the rest of you will be free from blame. So the brothers respond, and they're like, no, we would never do that. We would never steal from you. We would never do that. Test us, check all our stuff. If we are guilty, the one who stole it will die, and the rest of us will be your slaves. But notice that the steward responds. He changes it. He says, all right, yes, the one who stole it will be a slave. The rest of you can go for free. Right? The steward, he changes the punishment. He says, he wants to set up this punishment very specifically. We're not going to kill anybody. We don't want you all to be slaves. We only want that one person to be a slave, right? Not all of you, just the one kid. In verse 11, each of them quickly lowered his sack to the ground and opened it. And then the steward proceeded to search, beginning with the oldest and ending with the youngest. And the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. And at this they tore their clothes, and they all loaded their donkeys and returned to the city. So the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. The punishment has been laid out really clearly. And so then in verse 16, Judah steps up. He says, what can we say, my Lord? Judah replied, what can we say? How can we prove our innocence? God has uncovered your servant's guilt. We are now my Lord's slaves, we ourselves and the one who was found to have the cup. But Joseph said, "Far be it from me to do such a thing. Only the man who is found to have the cup will become my slave. The rest of you, go back to your father in peace." And again, we see that same thing. Judah is this spokesperson for the brothers. But just like the steward, Joseph lays it out very specifically. He says, no. It's not going to be all of you, just Benjamin. Benjamin will be the slave. The rest of you, go ahead. Go home. You're free. You can get away with this. Go. And then Judah responds in the end of the chapter. It says, "If the boy is not with us, when I go back to your servant my father, and if my father, whose life is closely bound up with the boy's life, he sees that the boy isn't here, he will die. Your servants will bring the gray head of our father down to the grave in sorrow. Your servant guaranteed the boy's safety to..." When he says your servant, he means me, right? I guaranteed. Your servant guaranteed the boy's safety, my father. I said, if I do not bring him back to you, I will bear the blame before you, my father, all of my life. Now please let your servant, please let me remain here as my Lord's slave in place of the boy, and let the boy return with his brothers. How can I go back to my father if the boy's not with me? No, do not let me see the misery that would come on my father. Judah, out of love for his father, offers to exchange his life for his brother. Judah, the guy who sold his brother into slavery, now wants to substitute his life to save his brother's Benjamin. And Judah didn't do anything wrong this time. Judah didn't steal that cup, right? He didn't make any mistakes, but here he is, taking the blame on himself to save the annoying favorite little brother. The last time that we did this, like 6-7 chapters ago, the last time we did this, Judah sold the annoying brother, right? Like that's the last time we had this, we sold him into slavery. And yet this time, Judah, out of love for his father, offers his life in exchange for his brother. This is the moment when the whole story comes together. Joseph has set this up so that Judah would have a chance to redeem himself. This whole situation, bringing Benjamin into Egypt, making sure that the punishment was very clear, laying out a choice for Judah. Joseph has created an opportunity. He has given Judah a chance to make the choice a second time. This is the same setup like it was before. You can sell out your brother. You know, that annoying little brother who is dad's favorite, you can get rid of him. You can put him in slavery in Egypt, or you can show me that you have changed. That's what Joseph has done here. He has set up this. Do you see those parallels? But this time, instead of selling out his brother, Judah shows that he has changed by offering his life in exchange for his brother's life. You know, I heard another story one time about a guy who, out of obedience to his father, gave up his life in exchange for his adopted brothers and sisters. He comes into the story. He didn't do anything wrong. He never did anything to deserve death, and yet he took the punishment on himself so that we could live. Jesus gave up his life. He substituted his life for you. All of us, we have sinned, right? And the punishment for sin, the wages of sin is death, right? That's what Romans tells us. That's the setup. If we have sinned, we get death. And Jesus took that punishment on himself to save you. And fun fact, I mean, it's a little crazy, but it shows you how all of this comes together. Jesus, the Son of God, is from the line of Judah. Jesus is Judah's great, 15 greats, great-great-great-grandson. Judah offers his life to save his brother, which is an echo of what Jesus was going to do thousands of years later on the cross for all of humanity, offering his life to save each and every one of us. Judah echoes the role of Jesus. But wait a minute, didn't we do the same thing last week? If you weren't here last week, what we saw was that last week the brothers approached Joseph in the same way that we approach God. Right? We saw that Joseph, in chapter 43, Joseph was the echo of Jesus. And in chapter 44, it's Judah who is the echo of Jesus. And this brings us to a theme that we have found throughout this whole series in our lives. God uses the good and the bad that's going on in your life to bring about transformation in a nurturing, disciplined sort of way. God uses transformation in your life to bring salvation to other people. God took, let me see if I can explain it like this. God took Joseph, the spoiled brat little brother, right? The snot-nosed brat. And he worked on him in the good and the bad in his life, in the hot and the cold of his life, and he brought salvation to Egypt. He used transformation to bring salvation, and he saved a whole lot of people through Joseph. And now in this chapter, he's doing the same thing with Judah. God took Judah, the cold-hearted, literally sold my brother into slavery big brother, and he worked on him in the good and the bad, in the hot and the cold of his life to bring salvation to Benjamin. He used transformation to bring salvation. The good news for us should be pretty obvious. God brings salvation through transformation. In your life, God is working through all the pieces to create transformation in your life. God brings salvation through transformation in your heart. And that's awesome, but we already knew that. The new piece for us today is that when God transforms your life, when he makes you more Christ-like, he will use that. It's not just about your life. In this amazing capacity to work transformation in your life, it brings about salvation for other people. There is a ripple effect to salvation. God saves Joseph. Then he transforms Joseph. Then he uses the transformed Joseph to save Egypt. God saved Judah. He transformed Judah. And then he used the transformed Judah to save Benjamin. God saves you. God transforms you. And then God uses the transformed you to save untold millions. Your salvation is not just about you. There is a ripple effect to salvation. God has saved you and transformed you so that he can use you. There are people in this world that will be saved by the transformation that's going on in your life. Now, of course, I want to be careful with my language here. You are not Jesus, right? Even the transformed disciple version of you is not Jesus. Joseph didn't really save Egypt. God did. Right? And Judah did not really save Benjamin. God did by using Judah. Does that make sense? I'm not up here like claiming that you guys are God. I'm not claiming salvation, right? I am simply pointing out the fact that God has a track record of using people like you and me to change the world through us. The reality of being the hands and feet of God is that if we are submitting to God's work through our lives, our hands and feet are literally going to change people's lives. God brings salvation to others through transformation in your life. So I have two challenges for you coming out of this good news. First, if there is a ripple effect to salvation, if the ripple's in the pond, the first challenge is to throw your stone into the pond. Stop treating your faith as if it's a self-help personal development course. Stop imagining that your spirituality is just between you and God and nobody else. If God can change your life, he can use your life. Throw your stone into the pond. You see, what I want you to do, I want you to start seeing the good days and the bad days as training, as something that is transforming you, cultivating you, so that someday you can save somebody's life. For example, let's say you got one of those days where you hit every single red light on the way to work. Like it almost feels personal, like the red lights hate you, right? Like every stoplight turns right before you get to it, and it's driving you crazy. But what if maybe what's going on there is that God is cultivating patience in your heart? God is trying to teach you how to be patient. Maybe God is giving you an opportunity to learn patience because in 2 weeks, that annoying coworker that talks too much, she's going to be going on, but because you worked on patience, you can actually listen to her and you will be able to love her better, and maybe you would hear some warning signs for depression or suicide that nobody else picked up on because nobody else was listening to her. Now, I just, made that up, but this is how God works in our scriptures today. God cultivates us. He works on us. He transforms us. He creates a Christ-like character in our heart so he can put that character to work saving people's lives. Which leads me to the second challenge. When you are throwing your stone in the pond, don't detach the story from the concrete applications. This is not about saving souls or getting baptisms or whatever. God uses cultivated Christ-like character for the salvation of souls and of bodies. Joseph was not cultivated to be the next Billy Graham of Egypt, right? He didn't become some pastor. He didn't become some religious leader or Bible study leader. No, Joseph was the first guy in history to lead a successful government food distribution program. Right? That's what Joseph did. That's what God saved him to do. He let God's transformation work on him. He threw his stone in the pond and it rippled out. The cultivated Christ-like character that God is building, it doesn't mean you're going to go out and be a pastor. The cultivated Christ-like character, it means that God is going to use your transformed life to heal the sick, to feed the hungry, and to clothe the naked. Don't detach the Christ-like character from concrete, practical application. Your life matters so much. And it's not just because God died for you and he loves you and he saved you, but it's also because he's been working on you. God has been working on who you are. Through every high and low, God has been giving you opportunities to create a Christ-like character in your life. And so if you could just throw your stone in the pond, submit to God's working on your heart, you can change the world. And so I'll leave you with this. May you embrace the transformation that God is working in your life. Try to cultivate a Christ-like character with every lesson that life has for you. And finally, may you work out that transformation in your life to bring salvation in practical, concrete ways to the people around you. Amen. This has been another episode of the Simpleton Sermon Podcast. I hope you appreciated the message. I know that it meant a lot to me to write. I think I've mentioned it before. Sermon writing and presentation of preaching a sermon is a devotional exercise for pastors. And it is just, I grow every sermon I write, and I really appreciate those. So I'm very happy to be able to share this with you. If you appreciate the content we're creating, go ahead, hit that like button, subscribe, share it to your friends, leave a review. Apparently that's very helpful in helping other people find our content. So if you want to leave a review, if you're looking for a sermon manuscript, or if you just want to know more, you can always head over to thesimpleton.org. That's my personal blog, but it also has links to the YouTube channel and the manuscripts and book reviews and all kinds of good stuff over there at thesimpleton.org. We will see you back here next week at 10 a.m. on Tuesday, but until then, I am looking forward to the future. Bye.